Hello, hello. Welcome everybody to our bonus session of the CCI After School Club. Hopefully our smooth electronic sci-fi music has got you all ready for today's musical themed session. So I'm going to run through a few things as usual, and then I will hand over to our workshop lead today. So, welcome to the CCI After School Club. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending your Tuesday afternoon with us. We've been running these sessions on a Thursday at 4 o'clock. We've still got one this Thursday coming up, but this is a bonus session provided by an academic from the CCI. So, we're super excited about this one. And thank you for being here. So, who is the CCI? Just in case you aren't familiar, CCI is a creative computing institute based in UAL, which is University of the Arts London. It supports interdisciplinary teaching, research, and knowledge exchange, all at the intersection of creativity and computational technologies. So we are creatives, we are technologists, we are academics, researchers, gamers, sound artists, all the lot, and we are all based at the CCI. We've got courses, master's programs, short courses, and we are now bringing an after school club to you, which is aimed at young people, beginners, and families that are interested in the realm of creative technology. So the CCI After School Club was going to be a physical thing. It was going to be based in our community space at the playground in Camberwell. And then, unfortunately, we did have a pandemic, as I'm sure you are all aware. So we've worked really hard to bring this to you virtually. So thank you for joining us and for helping make this happen. We've got a program. We've been running the program. This is our 4th week now, I believe. And good news is it will be starting up again in a couple of weeks. So we've got today to enjoy and Thursday the 18th to enjoy. And then we're going to have a break to do some work behind the scenes. And we're going to get right back on it after that. So please do keep in touch with us via Eventbrite and YouTube. Definitely subscribe and keep up to date with the club. So the club, you can expect 3D design, creative coding, machine learning, artist talks, and more. And as I said, all sessions aimed primarily at young people and families. But if you are a beginner and you're interested, please do join us. This space is a safe space for everyone. If you are watching on Eventbrite, it's probably a good idea to head over to YouTube. That way you can keep up to date with the live comments. If you're stuck at any point, or if you'd like to comment on anything that our visiting artist is saying, or anything that you'd like to express, please use the comments, but don't share any personal data in there. But feel free to ask questions and provide prompts, whatever it may be. Share what you're doing via the comments, and we'll get those to Rebecca as soon as possible, and she'll be able to respond to you. Other safeguarding things, the session is being recorded, of course. Nobody's identities are revealed in that, and it's being recorded so that people that have missed out can watch it afterwards. The main thing is just be kind and be respectful. So we've got minors in the room, so no foul language. And as I said, just be kind and have fun. That's the main thing. So just be pleasant in the comments. Otherwise, we'll certainly boot you out. And if not, please join us and stay with us and have fun learning today with Rebecca. So yeah, thank you again for joining us. Yes, let's get going. Let's meet our visiting academic, Rebecca Fiebrink, who is coming from the CCI and is going to lead the session today on sound, machine learning, and all of the above. I'll let you take it from here, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for that introduction, and thanks to everybody here for joining us today. This is going to be a really fun session. I wish I could be with you in person, but maybe someday soon. So today I'm going to be talking about building musical instruments with machine learning, and hopefully my screen can be shared up there. Excellent, there it is. In this talk, I've got some slides, but I'm also going to show a bunch of software. And if you would like to download this software and play along, you can absolutely do that. This is free. It is soundcontrolsoftware.com. I will give you that URL again in a few minutes, and I'll give it to you again at the end of the talk, and we'll make sure that you have access to it. It is absolutely not necessary for you to use the software as we go. Especially at the beginning of this talk, it's going to be important just for you to listen. I'm going to talk about not just the software, but what is machine learning? How do we make sound with computers? So we'll get there. And again, this talk is being recorded, so feel free to just sit back, enjoy the demos, and then go play around with the software later on in your own time. This talk is going to be here on YouTube. So while I leave this URL up for you, who am I? I am a musician and I am a computer scientist. And in my job at UAL, I make new technologies for music and art. And to do this, I use a variety of skills. I'm a programmer, so I write a lot of my own software. I design that software. I think about what does the user interface look like? How is it going to be possible to make machine learning usable by real people, for instance? And most importantly, I work really closely with people who are going to be using my technology as part of the research process. So this software you're going to see today was designed in collaboration with some music teachers and music therapists, including Jan Hall there in the purple, who I think is joining us on the stream, and a lot of kids. Kids mainly with a variety of physical and mental disabilities. And the goal of this project was really to make it easier for them to make music, to make sound, to engage in new forms of music making in music therapy, in music classrooms, and so on. And so the initial inspiration for this project came out of some research I was doing with professional composers and professional instrument builders, where we were using machine learning in much the same way. So the tools you're going to see here today are used from everybody from 8-year-old kids. I've used them with my son, who's actually 8 months old, and he really enjoys it, all the way to professionals. So hopefully there's something here for everybody, something that you can play around with on your own if you have a computer. So here's the outline for my talk. I'm going to start out by really talking a bit about sound on computers, because we can't necessarily understand how we make musical instruments that change the sound in real time unless we know a little bit about how computers are making and changing sound in real time. And then I'm going to do a little bit of talking about how computers might sense what a musician is doing. And here, when I talk about musician, I'm talking about you at home with your computer, about a kid, about a professional, anybody who's sitting down with a computer, and as they do something, the sound is changing. Then I'm going to talk about how machine learning can help us connect musicians' actions that we're sensing in some way to the control over sound. And I'll give you a bunch of demos with the sound control software, and we'll finish up with a group discussion. And as we go, we're going to be taking questions. I see some of you already posting some questions in the comments, and that's great. And we'll get to those as we go. All right, so here's the URL again, as I mentioned, soundcontrolsoftware.com. There's an installer for Windows, an installer for Mac. There's also a bunch of audio loops, which are pretty fun. They're just regular audio files, so you can use them with Sound Control or you can use them on your own. So check that out. And now I'm going to jump into some learning. So starting out, this is a lecture that I often give to my university students, but there's no special background required. Some of you might know this already. Some of you might have never thought about this. How does sound work in the real world? Well, let's take, for starters, something really simple that you could use to make noise, which is a tuning fork. And I don't have a tuning fork here with me, but if I did, I would take it and I might hit it on my desk. And one of these little fork tines is going to start vibrating back and forth. And as it vibrates forward, it's going to push the air in front of it out just a little bit. And as it goes back, it's going to pull the air towards it in the other direction just a little bit. So what we get is this traveling wave of air, which is compressed and then expanded and then compressed and expanded and so on over time. And this wave travels through the air until it hits your eardrum, and your eardrum is pushed to one side and then pulled to the other side, and so forth, with exactly the same shape, exactly the same speed as that tuning fork. So you're going to hear a sound, which is the sound of the tuning fork, and it's going to sound something like this. Now, when we're working with sound in computers, often we, don't like to make these diagrams with all these little dots. That's kind of tedious. Instead, we do something much simpler. We might draw a graph where the top of the graph is maximum compression of the air, and the bottom of the graph is minimum compression of the air. And if we were to draw that graph for this sound, we would get this really nice, smooth wave. And this is actually a sine wave. That's one thing that makes tuning forks nice. If you've studied sines in math, this is exactly the same thing. If you haven't, though, don't worry about it. The important thing is we can draw a line that represents how the air is changing over time, which is exactly the same thing as saying how is your eardrum moving over time when you hear a sound. And of course, tuning forks are not the most interesting things. In the real world, we might have an instrument. And instruments work exactly the same way, except that most instruments move that air back and forth in a pattern that's a little bit more complicated than a tuning fork. So this is a real guitar sound, and it sounds like this. And that guitar sound is moving the sound in this way. So we've got some jagged peaks and dips and a bunch of, little stuff happening. It's not just a nice, smooth, regular wave, but it still sounds nice and pleasing to us. So that's essentially how sound is working when you don't have a computer in the mix. But actually here today, you all have computers or mobile phones or something that you're using to listen to me at the moment. And what I've done is, I don't have a guitar inside my computer, obviously, but somebody has taken that guitar, and instead of having an ear here listening to it, they've had a microphone listening to it. And the microphone is really just a device for capturing the shape of that wave. And if we attach a computer to the other end of that microphone cable, we can say, hey, let's save the shape of that wave into a file somewhere. And then later on, if I want to replay that file, I just tell my computer, all right, send a signal that has this exact same shape out of a speaker or out of your earphones. And if you've ever looked closely at a speaker or looked inside your headphones, you'll see that there's a little cone or a little membrane, and that membrane moves really fast, usually too fast for you to see, but it's going to move in and out with the exact same shape of that wave that you see here. It's going to happen really fast, but it's going to push the air and then pull the air and push the air and so on. And eventually that wave is going to reach your ear. So that's what's happening right now when I play you this guitar sound, is your electronic device has this waveform and it's playing that out of your speaker. Okay, so that's everything you need to know about sound in the world and sound on computers. So that brings us to the question, if we're going to make musical instruments with computers where we're not playing a guitar or a tuning fork, but actually playing the computer like a musical instrument, how might we generate sound in that context? And there are a few options, and Sound Control, the software, allows you to use each of them. So the first option is just to play a pre-recorded file, right? Sometimes we call these samples, sometimes we call these loops. These all mean pretty much the same thing in this context. So I've got a file on my computer which literally tells the computer what is the shape of that sound. So let me go move over to my Sound Control software. And I'm not going to explain exactly what I'm doing right now, but I'm just going to show you a little demo of how you might do that in Sound Control. So I've chosen the looper as my sound mode, and I can choose a genre. Here I'm going to choose some reggae loops. And what I've got is a different file that's automatically associated with each one of these little squares or pads. And when I click on it, I can hear that file. So let's play around with this just a little bit. You better run. Said the wicked man come. Wicked man come. Babylon come. All right, so in that demo, I've just got 6 files. They're all synced with each other, so they're going at the same tempo, and they sound really good together. Same with the ska and garage examples, but you could load in your own examples, maybe things that you record yourself. And already, that's a pretty fun way to play sound on a computer, just by triggering the playback of something that's pre-recorded. But that's absolutely not the only thing that we can do. So I'm going to go back to my slides here and talk about option 2, which is to synthesize a sound. And synthesize here just means we're going to create this sound from scratch. We don't start with a recording. Rather, we can think about this as, what you might do as a person with a pencil, where you might draw a waveform, which is maybe nice and smooth, like that sine wave from the tuning fork, or maybe it's really jagged, or maybe it's a triangle or something else. But instead of drawing this as a person, we could write a computer program to draw this shape. So here are a few shapes that I've programmed into my computer. And the only really important thing for you to know right now is that different shaped waves are going to make different sounds. So here's a sine wave that I've synthesized just by using the sine function on my computer. Just same sine if you've seen that in maths class. I'm using that to make this smooth pattern here. And this is what it sounds like. And maybe I want to draw that same shape, but I want to stretch it out a little bit. This is what this one sounds like. So you see there's a difference in the sound here and here. Or maybe I want to draw some triangle-shaped waves. And we notice that that's suddenly a different quality of sound. Or maybe I want to draw something that's a lot more complicated, and this is what this one sounds like. All right, so these are just a few ways of doing sound synthesis. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of ways of doing this, and that's a whole other after-school workshop that we could do. But we're going to leave this here for the moment, and I'm going to go back to the software and show you how you might use sound synthesis in the sound control software. So here's sound control, and now instead of using the looper, I'm going to use something called FM synthesis. And those of you who like, let me mute this for a second. Those of you who like Prince or Michael Jackson or Madonna, these sort of classic 80s rock with a bit of electronic sounds thrown in, FM synthesis is the type of sound synthesis that they used all over the place. It was the sound of those artists, and a really exciting advancement actually in music technology. Now, I'm giving you a very simple version of FM synthesis here. This is not going to allow you to sound like Prince unless you really, really work at it, but it's going to still give you an interesting set of sounds that you wouldn't get from a guitar or a drum or other acoustic instruments. So let's take a listen to this, and I'm just going to hit this randomize button, and we're going to hear a bunch of different sounds come out. Okay, so what you heard there is I've got 3 sliders to control different aspects of this sound, which I'm calling pitch, weirdness, and strangeness. And these change the computer program that's in charge of drawing that sound shape and telling your speaker what to play. So again, this is just one type of synthesis, but I think it's pretty fun. So I included it in sound control. All right, let's go back here. So that's synthesis. Option 3 is that you can do a sort of combination of these two things. Instead of just playing a recording that somebody has made of something in the real world or synthesizing a totally new sound, you could take a recording and then manipulate it somehow. So what do I mean by this? Well, there's, again, lots of ways to do this. I'm just going to show you a few simple ones. So here's our original guitar sound. Very lovely sound. And just looking at this, you should be able to see, well, as a person, I could redraw this in a few different ways. For instance, I might squash it down so that the difference between how far your speaker is out versus in becomes smaller. And that might look like this if I were to draw that on screen, and it's going to sound like this. So you'll probably notice there's a difference in volume here. All right, it's just a little bit softer. Or I could take that waveform and I could stretch it out, or I could squish it in. So here's a version of it that's just been squished just a little bit. And so let's take a listen to the original, and let's take a listen to this one. And here we notice that this is a different pitch or a different set of notes. And we can do all sorts of other more complicated things in a computer. We might take this line and we might smooth it out so it's less jagged. We might introduce more jagged parts. We could do all sorts of other complicated things. And we're going to alter the sound maybe in very subtle ways or maybe in really dramatic ways. And again, this is sound manipulation, and sound control allows you to do this as well, either with files that come with the software or files that you have yourself. So let's take a look at that. So here I'm going to take granulator. Granulator is a set of operations. Oops. This is a set of operations that are similar to what I just showed you on screen, just a little bit more complicated. They allow me to change the speed of a pre-recorded sound, the pitch, and the volume all independently. So let's take a listen to this. All right, so that's granulator. And again, that's manipulating a pre-recorded file. Okay, so let's go back to the slides. So we've talked about how to make sounds, but if we want to make a musical instrument that somebody can control in real time, we have to think about, well, how might you get information about what a musician is doing into the machine? And again, we have a bunch of options. The first options are just using the sorts of things your computer already does when it wants to sense what you're doing, right? You use a mouse all the time to tell the computer how to do things. You use a keyboard all the time. We could use these to make music as well, right? Pretty easy. Alternatively, we could do things like use the webcam or use another video camera that you attach to your computer. And I'll show you a demo of this, maybe 2 demos, depending on how much time we have. We could also use the microphone, right? An obvious example of this is that we could speak commands to our computer. Some of you might do that already. Alternatively, we could sing to the computer, or we could whisper to the computer. We could do other things, and the computer could analyze the sound coming in order to make decisions about what to do. Or we could use all sorts of other things that we could plug into the computer using USB, or maybe connect via Bluetooth. And I've got some of those here to do demos as well. So let's start just for fun by talking about a camera, because cameras are one of my favorite things to use when we make new musical instruments. They're pretty versatile. And I'm going to show you an example right now that does something called color tracking. And so what I've got is a very, very simple piece of software that connects to my webcam. And your webcam just sends any piece of software that wants to use it a set of pixels, which are just, think of it as a rectangle. And each spot in that rectangle is going to have a color value. And what we can do is say, well, I want to track maybe the color orange. This is my son's toy here. It's got some very nice orange on it. And I could tell my computer, hey, find all the pixels that are this color, or this color or very close to it, because actually if you look closely, there's some shadows on here, there's some reflection. This isn't all exactly the same color. And then what we could do is write a very simple program and say, well, what's the average of those X values? What is the average horizontal location of these pixels? And maybe that's right about here. And what is the average Y values? What is the average height of those values? And that's maybe right about here, right? And that is a good estimate of the center of the color that you're trying to track. So let's take a look at that in Sound Control. Let's see, there's my app. And so here, I'm going to now use this first drop-down box, and I'm going to choose my color tracker as my sensor and generate an instrument. Oops. And what I'm going to do is, hopefully you can see this on the screen. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. I've got this little toy, and I'm going to click on orange to tell it I want to track orange. And then I'm going to tell it how similar to orange a pixel has to be for it to be counted, right? And this is pretty good. This is finding things that I would consider orange and ignoring everything that I wouldn't consider orange. And what we see here is that it's giving me a horizontal and vertical position. And if I'm all the way over to the left, my horizontal value is 0. And if I'm all the way over to the right, my horizontal value is pretty close to 200. And same thing for vertical, right? I can get 0 up here and about 140 down here, right? So I get two numbers that describe where I'm holding this little rattle in front of the computer. And that's, I can do lots of things with that information. All right, so that's one way to get information from into the computer about what I'm doing. Many of you, if you go to school in the UK, have seen one of these. This is a microbit. And for those of you who don't know, microbit is like a tiny, tiny little computer, very simple, but it's got some sensors on it. And one of these is called an accelerometer. And you can't see it on here exactly, but it's on this chip, and it's a very simple device that just senses how this is being held according against gravity, or maybe if you're shaking it, you can get shaking information. But you can think about this as having three axes along which you could rotate this. So I could rotate it this way, I could rotate it this way, or if it's this way, I could rotate it a different way, right? And so I'm going to get three values from this microbit if I'm holding it still, which essentially tell me like, how am I holding it at any given moment? And so we could call these the X, Y, and Z axes of rotation. And again, sound control makes it pretty easy to just try this out, get that data, and look at that data. So I'm going to choose my microbit position using USB, because that's what I've got right now. And I'm going to connect to my microbit, and I'll zoom in here, and you should be able to see that as I move the microbit, you see these three numbers change. So I'm holding it pretty flat, and I'm getting this value is around 0, or no, which one? Yeah, this one is around 0 when I'm very flat and very careful. And then as I tilt it forward, I'm getting values like negative 1000. And as I tilt it backwards, I'm getting values around positive 1000. And similarly, as I move it in different ways, these other numbers are changing as well. So this is giving me data about how I'm moving or holding the microbit. Okay, the last sensor that I want to show to you is something that you probably haven't seen before, but it's a pretty interesting sensor that a lot of people use to do 3D work on computers, including using it for virtual reality. So you might be interested in that. This is called a leap motion. And the leap motion has two tiny cameras inside, and it has some light sources inside that emit infrared light. So it's light outside of the light that we can see as humans, but it sends this infrared light into the world and then has two cameras that can sense how that light is being reflected back by objects above the device. And then there's some software that this uses to look for objects that look like hands. So if you have human hands, or if you have a fake hand that's hand-shaped, it's going to find that and give you information about where those hands are in space. So of course, if you're in virtual reality, you might have a VR headset on or something, and you might be grabbing things in VR space. This is really good for that. But we could use this for anything else, right? Just to sense what your hand is doing when you're doing some other kind of task. So let me show you the leap motion in operation in sound control. So I'm going to close this up and now open up my leap motion. And we're just going to do something really, really simple. And I'll zoom in here I'm also going to hold the leap motion up so you can kind of see it's doing a pretty good job of finding my hand. And you're probably used to this idea now that we like, in many of these sensing applications, we like to describe the world in terms of coordinates, X and Y if we're talking about a 2D space, and maybe X, Y, and Z if we're talking about 3D. So right now, what this is giving me is X, which is telling me how far left to right my hand is, Y, which is how high up and down my hand is, and Z, which is how far forward and backward my hand is. Right, and again, we can use those numbers to do anything, but in sound control, we're going to use them to build a musical instrument. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the slides and we're going to bring this all together. So here's the big question. I've got some sensor values. I can, use the microbit and understand how I might be holding something. Maybe I hold this in my hand, or maybe I stick it in a hat and I move my head, or I tie it to my shoe and I move my foot. I could do all sorts of things. Or maybe I've got the color tracker and I'm tracking a toy, or I'm tracking a sticker that I put on my skin. Who knows? And then I've got these sound creation methods where I could choose which file to play. I could synthesize a sound and change the values that I'm using to change that synthesis, or I could manipulate a sound. But how do I go from one of these to say, this is what I'm sensing, to deciding how that should control the sound? Option one, which is what most people in the world do right now, is you write a program, you write some software, or you use someone else's software to do this. And sometimes this is really easy. Some of you might have programmed in Scratch before. Some of you might have programmed in Python or other languages. And if you've done that, you've probably made programs that look a lot like this, right? So if I say I'm doing color tracking and I get this information about my orange thing in front of the camera, I'm going to get an X value and a Y value. I could very easily write a program to say, well, if that X value is less than 100, then I know I'm on my left side of the camera, and maybe I want to play sound 1. And then maybe when I move to the right side, I want to play sound 2. Maybe I'm choosing which file to play. Right, you could write that program, and if you've never programmed before, I guarantee you, with a week of learning to program in some environment, you could also write this as well. So it's, that's actually one of the really fun things to do as a new programmer. However, if you start wanting more complicated control over sound, your programs get longer and longer. So this is a pretty simple program still, but this is, what about if I want to have 7 sounds to play? 7 sounds is not actually that many. There's 7 distinct pitches in a scale, for instance, and this is the code for just one scale, and it's not really doing anything more than that. And already it's becoming a little bit hard to eyeball and understand, even if, like me, you've been programming for 20 some years. Okay, so option 2 is forget writing a program. Instead, we can use machine learning to demonstrate which sounds should be played for which actions. And this is the cool part. Okay, go back to my slides here. So when we're using machine learning, this is what I want you to have in your head, right? So just a little flow chart of how data gets passed from one thing to another in the computer. So first, we get some data from sensors. So maybe we get the X and Y position of this rattle, or we get the hand XYZ position from the leap or something else. And then we take those data values and we give it to something that in machine learning we call a model. You could think of this as a decision-making piece of code. And this code that I showed you before is essentially doing the job of a model. And that model's really only responsible for saying, okay, I see these values coming in. I see that your rattle is on the left side of the webcam. Therefore, I want you to play maybe a guitar sound. And otherwise, I want you to play a drum sound. Okay, the cool part is that if we use machine learning to build these models, we don't have to write the code. Oops, here's an example of my data. I've already said that. If we use machine learning, we can get rid of that programming step and instead build this model using a machine learning algorithm. And this algorithm, someone else has already programmed it. We can just take it within a piece of software like sound control, and we tell this algorithm how we want this model to work by giving it examples. And I've put this text on the screen because this is really important. So I'm going to read this, and this is the most complicated thing in my whole session today. A learning algorithm builds a model or a decision function from a set of training examples. It tries to build a model that will produce a reasonable output, a reasonable sound here, for any new input from your sensors based on what it sees in the examples. So for instance, if I want to make guitar sounds on the left and drum sounds on the right, what I can really easily do as a person is say, here's an example of the rattle on the left, play a guitar when you see this. And that becomes one training example. And maybe here's another example on the left. This is also guitar. This is another training example. And then I could give it some examples and say, here, now I'm on the right, play a drum. Now I'm also on the right, play a drum. Those are two more examples. I give those to a learning algorithm. And if everything goes well, it builds me this model that is capable of seeing new rattle positions or new sensor data, and it's hopefully going to make a reasonable choice, a choice similar to what a human might make. And that's why we might call it a learning algorithm. This is why we might call this artificial intelligence, but actually it's not that complicated, as you will see. Okay, so just to make this clear, I'm going to throw a couple other examples of how learning works in other contexts that are all around us, that you might also be interested in, might recognize now as machine learning. So for instance, our model might not be deciding what sound to make when it sees a human action, but in fact it might be deciding whether to offer a particular medical treatment to a patient based on data about that patient. So in that case, we could take a learning algorithm to build this decision function. And our training examples in that case would be just a bunch of examples of lots of patients and how each one has responded to a treatment. Right? And you can see that if you collect data about thousands or even a million people, a good learning algorithm could make you a model that sees information about a new person and could, in fact, make a pretty good decision about whether to offer a particular treatment or not, based on whether previous people have responded well to it. Another example in which you could see this exact same kind of algorithm is weather prediction, right? So here, our inputs to the model are some data we collect about recent and current weather conditions, right? What's the temperature right now? What's the humidity? What was the temperature an hour ago or a day ago? And so on. And then we send this to a model, and then we want to predict what will the weather be like tomorrow? Will it be sunny? How warm will it be? And so on. And again, this is an example where we have lots of data that we've collected throughout history, examples of what the weather was like on one day, what the weather was like on the next day, and so on. And we can use a learning algorithm to produce us a model that will give us predictions. Okay, so that's all just to say this is a pretty standard machine learning approach. You can see this all around you in things like, email spam detection, in things like, the ways that YouTube recommends you new videos to watch. But here we're just using it to build musical instruments. Okay, so we are now going to enter the demo phase. I see a few questions, which I'll answer briefly, and then I'm going to show you how to use this machine learning within sound control to build an instrument. Okay, so I got a question here. Is it possible to connect a MIDI controller to sound control? Absolutely. I'm not going to do that in the demo today because I don't think most people are using MIDI controllers, but you can connect a MIDI controller like a keyboard, and you can also control MIDI software like GarageBand or Ableton or other things. So that is an advanced technique. You can find a tutorial video for that on the website. Let's see if there's any other questions. Where can we download Sound Control? If you came in late, it's soundcontrolsoftware.com. And yes, for those of you who are super audio nerds, this is software that my students and I have programmed, and it's been programmed in a language called Max MSP. Okay, so here we go. We're going to build some instruments using machine learning. First thing we have to do is choose what kind of sensor or other input we want to use. We could use the camera, the microphone, the keyboard, the mouse, microbit, leap motion. And then we also want to choose what kind of music making mode we want to use. Do we want to trigger files? Do we want to play FM synthesis? Do we want to do the granulator or MIDI or something else? And then once we have that, we're going to provide some examples of an input activity. So I think in the first example I'll give you, I'm going to do the color tracker and the looper, and I'm going to provide some examples, just like I mentioned a minute ago, examples of this colored object in different places. And we're going to tell it what sound to make when it's in different places. So here we go. Let's go to the software now, and I'm going to tell it, first of all, let's do some color tracking. Zoom in here too. Second of all, let's use our looper, and now let's generate a new little window here that has the color tracker and our looper, and a window, a little pane that I haven't talked about yet, which is to train a machine learning algorithm. All right, so let's start out and let's tell it that when first of all, we're going to do reggae because I like reggae, and we're going to put the object over here on the left. And when we see this on the left, I want to make this sound. And I'm going to hit this button, and it's just captured a few examples of this object in this position paired with this sound. And now I'm going to put it somewhere else. I'll put it over here. Maybe add the voice. And when I put it here, I'll hit precise. And this is telling it, I want just one sound over here, and I want both sounds when it's over here. And now I can turn the sound back on and run and play with that instrument. And in real time, we're going to get this data from the color tracker sent to that model, and that model is going to decide which sounds to play. That's it. You better. Wicked man, okay, so that's super simple, right? Super, super simple. But we can start making it more complicated really easily by giving it more examples. So let's do that. I'm going to put this in a few different other places and associate it with different combinations of these loops. And we're going to make an instrument that I can just kind of play by moving this around. You better run. Said the wicked man, come. All right. You better run. Said the wicked man, come. Wicked man, come. Babylon, come. You better. All right, so that's a really simple instrument. I'm going to do one other thing to it. I'm going to make it silent when I don't have the rattle in view. So one last example, and let's run it one more time. Oops, I'll turn the volume up. You better run. Said the wicked man, come. Right, and there we go. And of course, I could change my samples here. I could run this with ska. Or I could put my own samples in, and I'll maybe show you that in a few minutes because I want to show you a couple other interesting ways to use the software first. I get another question. Would we be able to expose machine learning code and learn more about coding using this tool? Unfortunately, no. So the code that the learning algorithms make is actually generally pretty complicated. It's not going to be so useful to look at as a human, unfortunately. All right, let's let me do a microbit example. I'm going to do microbit here, and I'm going to choose, let's do the FM synth here. All right, so now what I'm going to do is tilt this around. And for each tilt position, I'm going to find a sound that I like for that position. And I'm, again, going to hit this precise button. So let's do this. Okay, and now I'm going to run. Right, and you see with this instrument, I'm not just choosing which sound to play, I'm actually changing the values of each of these 3 sliders. So I'm able to get sounds out of my instrument that weren't in the examples. So this makes it pretty fun for building an instrument that allows you to sort of explore a space of sounds that you're not familiar with just by moving something around. So that's one of the things that I like to do with FM synthesis. And now maybe for my last example here, I'll show you the leap motion with granulator. Notice, of course, I could use the leap motion with looper, with FM synth, with the MIDI. This is sort of mix and match here. It's really whatever input you want for whatever output. All right, so I've got the leap motion and I've got my hand, and same idea. I'm just going to find some combinations here that I like and hit this button when I want to say, all right, machine learning, make me this particular sound when you see my hand doing this thing. Oops. Okay, and again, I could use a different file here. Or I could drop my own file in. And we're getting to the end of our time here, so I just want to make sure that you see a few of the other functions that might make this really fun for you to play around with. One of them, as I mentioned, you can use your own samples. And for this, let's use the microbit and the looper. And here I'm going to make an instrument that allows me to change my own sample. So I've got animal sounds here. I can put a different animal on each pad and maybe have a dog bark when I do this, and a lion growl here, and some other kind of growl there. And okay, I can do this with musical sounds. Turn that off. I can stop, dog. Be quiet. As you see here, we've got some Bach, we've got some ska, we've also got fart samples because we know that lots of kids like fart samples. So I'll let you explore that on your own. If we were doing an in-person workshop, we might have a competition at this point to see who could make the funniest fart instrument, but I'll leave you to do that at home. Okay, so let's see. Got a few other comments to make. By the way, now is a good time. If you do have other questions, type them in the window and I'll see them and try to answer them before we wrap up. So there's another mode that sound control runs, which is, you might have seen this quick button. which is a little bit different. Instead of saying, here's how I want to move, or here's the position I want to be in to make a particular sound, you could just say, hey, here's a whole bunch of ways that I might move with this sensor. These are the things that I can do that are comfortable. Build me an instrument that I can play using that whole range. So I can show you this very quickly, where I might use the microbit, and we'll go back to reggae. We'll delete the instrument that I've done before, and I'm just going to hold this quick button while moving the microbit in some ways that are comfortable. And now I can run, and what we'll see is that I can just explore, and each position I choose is going to give me some combination of sounds, but I don't know ahead of time what they are. Oops. So again, that's something that you could play around with yourselves. All right, so let me check if there's any questions that have come through. No other questions that I see here. Let's check the other window. All right. How do you access the samples? If you are on the Sound Control download website, which I will put on the screen again here, soundcontrolsoftware.com, there's the link at the top is to download the installers, and then there's a bunch of links below that for the samples. And while we're waiting to see if there's any last questions from anyone, I do want to thank the people who have enabled the creation of this software. So we've gotten some great funding from some organizations, including the Paul Hamlin Foundation, the Northamptonshire Music and Performing Arts Trust. They have a musical inclusion project, which has really been instrumental to this work from the beginning. They're supported by Youth Music, and also the Clinic for Open Source Arts has given us some recent funding. So thank you to all those people, and of course to Jan Hall, to Rebecca Price, and the kids who've worked with them, who've helped us really, take this software over many iterations to build something that is as useful as we can make it. All right, I think that's about time to wrap up. So we've said 1 second. All right, with that, I will thank all of you for coming today. The Sound Control website has a forum on it where you can go and ask questions if you need any help with anything. This is free software. It should hopefully work on your machine. If it doesn't, do get in touch and we'll see what we can do. All right, I get the message that it is time to wrap up. I see it loading. Hello.
Hello, thank you so much, Rebecca. That was so insightful. That was amazing. I hope that everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. I can't believe you packed so much into an hour. It was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully we can have you back or something. Yeah, that was really, really amazing. And yeah, a massive thank you to you, and a massive thank you to everybody that joined us today. I've got a few closing comments, but not too many. And I'll let everybody get on with their Tuesday evenings. So yeah, firstly, thank you. Secondly, we have got an event on Thursday still. So our usual Thursday events at 4 o'clock are still running. So please join us this Thursday. We've got a student from the CCI leading a session on mouse cursors with P5. So please tune in for that. And as always, subscribe to keep up to date with our future events. And you can also keep up to date with us via the CCI Eventbrite as well. So I'll see you all on Thursday at 4 o'clock. Spread the word. Take some time to unpack everything that Rebecca's packed into the session today, because it was amazing. I've learned so much about sound and machine learning, and I hope that you all have too. I'll see you on Thursday, and on Thursday I'll be revealing a new lineup for the new programme of events. Thank you very much, everybody, and enjoy your Tuesday evenings.